Good evening, everyone. It is Sunday night. We're going to start a new week. Woohoo. We're almost getting into the end of May, finally getting that warm weather, which is nice. Give me a second while I share this out to one more page. Let's talk about our sponsors for tonight. So we have our awesome sponsors. We have Melone Management with Lisa Melone. Do you have a project that's running right now and you need some help with doing stretch goals? You need some help promoting it? You need some help putting it together? Get a hold of Lisa Melone with Melone Management and she will hook you up. We also have 183 Degree Studios with Alfred Trujillo, Doobie Doobie Doo, and Miss Kara Nicole, AZ Power Girl. Check out their work on Patreon as well as their current campaign still on Indiegogo for Fire Bitch 2. We also have Codex Entertainment LLC with Luis Torres, dropping Lily the Demoness Chapter 5 later this year, and they just wrapped up the project Nebula Pearl. We also have Naughty Faeries. Naughty Faeries, Stripper Assassins number 5 is available on Kickstarter now. There's a link in the comments, a link in the description, as well as a link to the Etsy page where you can get caught up, or to the Kickstarter where you can also get caught up and get issues 1 through 5. We also have Outpost 426 Studios with CB Zane and Michael Shoemaker. They've got Black Rabbit coming out later this year, as well as their other titles, Into the Suck and Scorpiana. And CB Zane will also be launching a Might standalone later on this year. And last but not least, we have our final sponsor of the show, DPopp Customz. Do you have a print that's going out of style? Is it sitting in the closet collecting dust? Hit up DPopp Customz and make a custom lit frame that may play and go along to the music. So with that being said, without further ado, we're going to bring out Dustin Brunell.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
What's going on, man?
Not much, man. You've got a serious list of sponsors there, dude. Like some awesome people in there.
There is some awesome people in there. What's going on, Mr. Ed Williams? How you doing tonight, buddy? It's one of my
super
friends.
cool folks in there, man. CB Zane. I mean, oh my gosh, Lisa Melone. You got some like some real dope folks in there, man. That's cool. Super cool.
Hey, man, you know what they say? Run in a good circle, right? That's what it's all about. Surround yourself with good people and do good work and have fun together. Because that's what we do.
Man. Raise
we don't
each other up, man. Raise each other up.
That's right. We all have the same common interest: comics, having fun, doing stupid shit all the time.
A lot of that going around. Yeah,
a lot of that going around.
For sure. I'm down.
So, man, you got your current project Greed going on right now. Yeah. But as always, I like to back things up. I want to talk about inspirations. I want to talk about you and how we got to this point. You know, where you're doing Wednesday nights, you do videos with Jim Noble. You guys talk about movies, and you know, then you've got the other project that you did too. Working on. Oh, you're working on Dark Side. Yeah.
Yeah. The Listener we do as well. We've got a third IP coming out this year. So we're really excited about everything going on. Inspiration, bro. I mean, inspiration comes, you know, and I'll go back to your intro video because it's phenomenal. It's very powerful. I have 2 kids, and Greed's inspirations come from my children. You know, I use both of them as points to learn from and to play with and to see with my characters and stuff, how my kids would react in certain situations, what they would do, you know, if they were brought into these things. But it all started with eulogy, like last year, and that's where it all came from, man. Like it all begun in a eulogy. My Uncle Les died, and my great Uncle Les, and he's one of the first Native American Green Berets, and he disappeared for years, like absolute years, and then showed up at my grandmother's like 5 years ago. Just like showed up out of the blue, right? And they lived in South Florida and we lived in Jacksonville. And my grandmother was like, hey, look, can you come down and help your uncle move in? You know, he's buying a house and stuff with cash and all kinds of other shenanigans. No one knows where he's been, da. So I was like, yeah, sweet. You know, we'll come down there and we'll help him out. Well, he started telling us stories about our past and our history, you know, and our people and all kinds of other craziness. But it was more of the stuff that he was talking about, like his personal beliefs and stuff that were really powerful. And PTSD was smashing him at that point in time in his life. You know, it was really bad. So we'd go down there once every couple months just to make sure he was okay, you know, make sure everything was going all right.
So that lead to part of why he ran off for a little while? Or?
Yeah. So like he did some awful things, And I'm not going to say he did awful things for the country or anything. He did awful things to survive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And they weren't awful at that point in time, but as we see them as human beings, they would be awful things, you know? And that's one thing about the listener, the stuff that we put into it. The scariest stuff is stuff that really happened. You know, it like really went down. And that's the wildest stuff. You know what I mean? The dudes that were literally getting, you know, like gutted and stuff by these guys, because they would send like 5 dudes in to clean out an area before other people could come in. And they'd all be Native American dudes, and they'd send them down with a couple dogs, and they'd be like, hey, clean out this area. You know, and it was a wild, wild situation that he would tell us about. And it happened all the time. And he'd come back and he'd be like, you know, he'd come back to and be telling us, you know, that it wasn't for, you know, the war or anything like that. He just wanted to come home. And he got so good at it that it just became repetition, you know. So the scariest stuff, like Sonny going to kill the young Chinese girl Lee in our first issue, and Addie stepping forward and stopping that from happening, really occurred. But my uncle wasn't a CO at the time, so the child didn't make it, which is different than our book, you know what I'm saying? But she didn't make it in the real world. And that was something that inspired me, all these things that I was just like, good Lord, man, you know. That's why the book's called The Listener, because my wife and I used to sit and listen to the things that he had to say. And we created this world loosely based on the stories that he told us, you know, and we added theology and stuff like that and mythology to make it that much more interesting, because we're desensitized, right? So I just wanted to make sure that I caught things, because, you know, blood and gore is something nowadays you could see in anything, right? You know,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
It's
not
everywhere.
anymore, you know what I mean? So it was like, all right, well, I don't want the gory moments in my books to be what really catches you in those moments. I want the act to catch you, you know, and like a human being would do this, you know. And when he passed away, I wrote this eulogy, and I had like 10 people in the industry reach out and go, Dustin, you got to do something. You know what I mean? You don't, you know, you talk about him, you don't want him to disappear. You don't want his stories to go away. Well, write them, you know, bring them to life.
Immortalize it in words and in comics.
Absolutely. So it became a thing. And that's where it all stemmed from, and to start. And then when Greed came about, I shut myself away for almost a month, and I didn't talk to anybody except with the few exceptions, good friends of mine and my wife and my mom and dad and stuff like that. And I put together, oh my gosh, these loose scripts that I wanted. You know what I mean? And I wrote these cool scripts for Greed at the same time that I was writing for The Listener, because I wanted this world. I was creating this massive space, you know, in its own real world that could exist. But I wanted to have characters that could be fun and interesting and not just balls to the wall all the time. You know, I wanted comedy and stuff, but I hadn't been writing that in The Listener. So I was like, oh, well, I'll start over here. And my son is 2 and my daughter is 10. And they're wildly different personalities, right? Like, wildly different. So it's like I wanted to have a character mix of those two, like a book mixed of those two types of people. You know, I know my son's coming into his own. I know he's only 2 years old, but as a father, you see those mannerisms. You know what I'm saying? You see the way he acts and see the way he reacts to things. You know, what makes him happy, what makes him laugh. You know,
Are
like,
they fight or flight?
right. Like, you know, if this green demon crawled out from underneath my son's bed, my son's going to lean over and try to talk to it. Yeah, that's just the way it's going to be. My daughter, on the other hand, is going to run and scream bloody murder out of the room.
Yeah.
You know, so, but those were the things that I wanted to bring to the table, because I grew up in the 80s. I was a big fan of Mighty Max and Ninja Turtles and Street Sharks and all these other fun stories.
Oh yeah, Street Sharks.
Right. So a lot of that stuff is put into my books, you know, original stories and stuff. But the idea and the fun stuff like Stand By Me is a big one for us with Greed. You know what I mean? There's a lot of, hey man, are you really my buddy? If you're my buddy, I'll stick with you to the very end. You know what I mean? Doesn't matter what happens, I'll be there. You know, but it's also from a 10-year-old boy's perspective. You know, I took them and I threw them in the world of The Listener. but it's 80 years into the future, so it's current time period versus the listener's time period of the 40s.
Okay.
So it's like a suburban youth, finding out there's a whole nother world that he didn't even know existed, but there's a war going on, and the listener's fun or Greed's fun because you can add all these characters from the listener, but at the same time, it's a standalone series. You know what I mean? There's not anything in it that you can't understand if you don't read the listener, and vice versa. You don't need to read them together. They're just fun stories either way. You will see characters from the listener in Greed, which is fun. You know what I mean? They'll show up and add to the story, but not add anything that you wouldn't know if you didn't read the other book.
So you used to run a comic shop, but when
Yeah.
did you start getting into comic books? Like, what age did you like start really reading comics, and what was like the comic that inspired you to be like, these are awesome, I want to continue reading them?
Right. So I guess that's the golden question, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the big one, the end all be all when it all starts. So I grew up on a farm as a kid, and I didn't have like friends or cousins over or anything. We worked on the farm and went to school, and that was it.
Yeah.
Until I was like 9 years old. Until we moved to Florida, and my dad got a job with Nissan, and it was like, okay, well, I would work on the farm and I'd get a little money every week. And we had a little store in the middle of nowhere in Chesapeake, Virginia, which is huge now versus what it was then. So we had this little teeny shop, and you would go in and you could like get breakfast sandwiches, or you could get, like an old school mom and pop shop, right?
Yeah.
But it had like a spinner rack in it. And so we could grab books off there, or like we used to have this store called Roses. And you could go to Roses. It was like old school Walmart, right? And same thing with that. You could go in there. They'd have a spinner rack by the checkouts, and you could go and get a couple books. They'd never be sequential, though. You know what I'm saying? You're never going to get like ASM, 240, 241, 242, 243.
Make it 240 and then 249.
Right? Absolutely.
whatever they ended up snatching when it
For
came through.
sure. And I think I got on board with Spider-Man during the McFarlane run of Spider-Man, and it was a big deal for me because I was alone all the time. I was playing with Star Wars figures, and absolutely, I was playing with Star Wars figures and Aliens figures because I was a big fan of Aliens, at the time, because my parents were, so that that helped with that, But it was like, so you were playing with action figures, you were listening to Metallica, you were reading, Spider-Man comic books when you could get them, or Captain America. One of the biggest runs of Captain America for me, it was only 2 books. I'm not a huge fan. Nothing against the character. I didn't follow him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there were 2 issues where he was in the Savage Land and he was fighting dinosaurs, and I thought that was the coolest thing. Because they were like humanoid dinosaurs, like anthropomorphic dinosaurs, and I just thought that was awesome. But that got me into the Venom stuff. And when the character first came out, and I still have the issues around here somewhere. We were just showing them off the other night on Wednesday. We were just talking shit, but it's like there were the 2 issues where they were the green backed issue, and then there was the yellow backed issue. I can't remember the numbers. I'm awful with that right now. But there's it was the first like appearance of Cletus Cassidy was 360, 361, and then after that you had 362. Well, it was a little bit later. But you had the ones where Brock finds out that Peter's still alive after he thinks Peter's dead. And so they team up to fight Carnage, and then Peter turns on Brock at the end of it, and hits him with the sonic gun. And the Fantastic Four takes both of them away. All right. That was just the coolest to me. I was like, these characters are amazing. This is so awesome. Absolutely. And then you get into this deal with, how far into it do you get, and as I got older, it just random book, right? And then at like 11, I went to my first comic shop, and when we were in Florida, and it was called Suncoast Comics, which is very funny to me because it was owned by an older Japanese dude that used to sell a lot of anime stuff, and he had very few comic books, most back issues and stuff. But I just went in there with my mom and dad like once every 2 months, and I would pick up a few books, and it just got to be a thing. Like it got to be something I was excited about, right? And then it was, My buddy John, his dad was big into Spawn when
Oh yeah.
Tom started putting Spawn out. And his dad was in the military, and his dad would take us yard sailing and stuff and take us to the flea market because he was hunting Spawn comics. And it got to be like that because my dad wasn't into comic books. You know what I mean? He was a movie guy and he surfed all the time, which was fun, but he never got into comic books or reading in general.
Yeah.
It was a very different thing for me to have like I surfed from my dad, but that was about it. You know what I mean? Other than that, it was like, hey man, look, my buddy's dad is in the comic books. That's so cool. Let's, hang out.
Let's hang out and go pick up books.
Sit with him, I remember I would have never been allowed to watch Spawn at my house, the HBO cartoon, but I watched it at John's house, and I remember it was the coolest thing ever, right? So I got into design. I was in a military academy for 2 years. And I got into design. I went to the Dave School in Universal Studios, Florida, on the back lot of Universal to get my engineering degree. And I had to I'll never forget, I had to put in a piece. I was the youngest guy to ever get in. So they were very hesitant about even letting me in. I was turning 17 when I got in. And it was literally like I had to put in a piece of artwork every week for like 12 months. So like half the time I was in there to even get accepted. That's how early I had to start with my recruiter. And when I got in, it was just like, this is amazing. This is what I want to do forever. Get out. No one wants to hire a 19-year-old kid that just got out of college.
Yep.
No,
nobody.
19? You got out of college? Yeah. No, sorry, kid. You know what I mean? So I surfed a bunch of different countries, had a great time, came back and realized, man, it's really time to maybe see if I can find a real job. You know what I mean? So I hit up Disney, I hit up Universal. I couldn't get a job because experience, I didn't have it. Even though I went to college there, right? They were still like, hey, look, you got to do some work. You got to get some, some grunt work in before we can pick you up. And I was like, whatever. So I got a job designing security programs. Just give me the blueprints. I'm putting your buildings together. I'll tell you where your retinal scan's going to be. I'll show you where your doors are going to be at and all this jazz. And I did that for about 10 years. And some shenanigans happened. I had a guy pull a gun on me. It really sucked. But to be fair, I carried one. It was part of my job. And I worked with a lot of people that did. So whatever. It was about to happen eventually. It's going to happen.
Hey, I've been in that situation. I worked in armed courier, and I almost had to pull my gun on somebody who tried to tase me.
For sure. Well, it was to this point where we knew it was going to happen. We dealt with ships coming into the country and stuff and all kinds of other wild stuff. And then my wife was like, hey, look, the baby's 5. She's 5 years old, dude. You got to do something. So I did like 2 months of like psychological therapy. And then my wife was like, no more, we're done. So we took out everything we had put away and we opened a comic shop. And the comic shop did well. But it rehashed feelings that I had for comic books. You know what I mean? It was like, really, I've always enjoyed and I've always bought and always collected, but there was something about giving to other people in the industry that was interesting to me. Like, I loved when people would come in and they'd be like, hey, we're looking for this, 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 and this. And you're like, whatever, that's in the back, but have you read this? You know what I mean? Have you seen this? And the indie market became everything to me. You know what I mean? Cool. I love Marvel. I love DC, whatever, boom. Everybody's cool. Image is great, but real indie books, you know what I'm saying? Have you seen real indie books? So we made this big section in our store for indie books and stuff. And when we closed it and we moved to Tennessee, it was like, I got with my buddy Kyle Willis and we created Cowabunga Comics. And we do Cowabunga, and Cowabunga does really well. Kyle's getting seen a lot and stuff for his artwork. It's beautiful stuff. And
you just opened a new shop too.
Yeah. We're working on that right now. Well, he's working on that because he's in a different state than me, but he's working on that right now. We're really excited about that for him. They're just waiting for the other tenants to move out, and he's going to swing in, But there's a lot going on in that realm that kept pulling me. And I was like, man, I really enjoy indies, man. Really do, and all the different stories, because a lot of times, and I mean not 100% of the time, but I'll give you a good 80% they're original. About 80% are original, and that's interesting, right? And So when people started telling me I should write my own, I was like, man, I don't know. And then it was just like, I had a buddy come and he was like, what else do you have to do right now? You know what I mean? You're selling comics. Do something cool. Immortalize this. Use your feelings and stuff. And I was like, all right, man. So I put pen to paper and it ran. You know what I mean? It ran. And it's still running.
Well, and see, that's the great thing about indie comics is, you have the big three, and you have some of the indie publishers, Boom, and it's just nice to see indie that comes straight from the people that create them, and they don't publish because they write out of their head. This is exactly from their head to the paper what they did. A lot of times with the publishers and stuff, they like try to micromanage. Well, you really should do this, and Marvel and DC, they're just like, hey, let's figure out a way to reboot Spider-Man for the 57th #1, and let's create a new arc. And what if they were in an alternate dimension? And it's like the indie people are over here going, man, I've got the, like with your with these stories, with the listener. It's just like, man, I got these crazy stories that I heard over the years, and I really don't want them to die. Let's put them into a comic book. And that's something that's original to a point. I mean, yeah, there's stories like it that have been told before, but this is based on, true events, and you just write out of your head and you put it on paper, and, you get to read that project. Me, as, a reader, I get to read that and I get to see, the feeling and the emotion and the stuff that took place when all this was happening, and you get to experience it firsthand. And that's what's nice about it. You read the Marvel and the comic books, yeah, you get a little bit of time where you get to escape into another world, but you don't get that emotional attachment to the author or the creator, that wrote it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in indie books, you get that emotional attachment. You get to feel that, like with Zen on Anite. When I wrote that book, I wrote it straight emotion, dealing with the stuff in life. And then when I rewrote it last year, I rewrote in, all the angst and the anger and the frustration and the depression of, finding out I might have cancer and dealing with years and years of having open heart surgeries and stuff with my kid. And it's like when you read the story, the character goes through some shit and you get to experience it firsthand and feel that emotion. And so that's, I think, what the key is for indie comics versus the big three is you form an emotional attachment to the characters, because this is true, shit that comes out of our head that we rewrite into characters. This is what happened to me in real life, only you feel it through somebody else.
Absolutely. Well, it's powerful, right? It takes you to a place that you would not normally have gone. You may not have ever read a book like this. You may not know anything about any form of Native American tribe or their belief systems, and
even that there was a set of, Green Berets that were Native American.
Absolutely. Well, I don't believe in. I like to educate people without people knowing they're being educated.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very interesting thing, because no one likes to be taught. I don't give a shit what anybody's. No one likes to be taught anymore. You know what I mean? We know it all. The internet, Google. Yeah. Whatever. We don't need anybody's help, right?
We don't need a doctor. We've got WebMD.
Right. So it comes down to things like that, like with the listener and Greed, because they're both in the same world. It comes down to this fact: we created the other side, and the other side is, and boy, I thought it was going to ruffle feathers. I really did. I was like, oh man. But if I'm in, I'm all in, right? So I'm vested. So the other side exists, and on the other side, it's every theology that exists in this world, and that blew people's mind when I first started getting reviews back and stuff. They were like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "I'm dead serious." And it caught on, and people enjoyed it, because it was like, if there was ever a place that Christ, Odin, and Zeus could have a conversation, it's in my book. And I think that's a lot of fun for people. Same thing with like Hades and Lucifer. Currently, they're both vying over who's going to run hell in my book. So it's like the listener is a character, and it's more fun with Greed than it is the listener. Greed is it's just as gnarly, just as nasty, but it's fun. And
it's sprinkled with comedic stuff, here and there.
There's a lot of, the funnier stuff is in that versus in the listener, because in the listener you've got this world, but at the same time it's man, and that's the best way. It's just man. It's very metal, and it's like, so in this other world, you've got spirits and things that have not passed on, as well as gods and demons that all roam in this world. Like we joke about the fact if you walked across, the very small veil in between the two, you could literally see New Jersey from where I am in Tennessee, but New Jersey would be like Valhalla, right? And you could walk across the Bifrost, and the Bifrost would put you over in Italy, right in front of the gates of heaven. And these are things, everything that you see in the listener, with the exception of character design, when it comes to gods and deities, and monsters as well, I tried to stick true to original text, not Wikipedia, not anything like that. I went and I searched for what would be the most accurate as we could get to beings that we've never seen before, right? So I gave Thor my own look. Cuchulainn's got his own look. The Chupacabra, Llorona, all these characters, and the listener it's slowly becoming what I want it to be. We're about to be on book 3, so it's like, hey, look, it's a lot like it would be like, what would happen if Supernatural got the first couple seasons now before it got crazy, first couple seasons, the monster hunting and stuff like that got mixed with like Saving Private Ryan mixed with the Frighteners. And that's because the listener can see and interact with the dead, so it's like he has noble spirits, that are his guardians, and I like that concept. He's not a superhero. He doesn't have superhero powers or anything. So it's just very, very interesting, the character and what he's going through, and what's going on with these, what could really happen, if these beings existed. What if there were gods that were supposed to monitor, monsters and demons and keep them in check? What if Chupacabra were okay and they were literally supposed to go and kidnap X amount of children a year? But the minute they take too many, they're upsetting a balance. There's got to be someone to keep them in line. The listener is slowly becoming and building in the storyline to show that he is all the tribes' demigod and keeps up with everything involved in Native American monsters and deities and stuff like that, versus, you've got Cuchulainn that handles the Celtic gods, what's supposed to be going on over there. And it's really interesting, pulling these characters together. And with Greed, it was fun. Like I could make it so, fun. Like it laughed and it jokes. And, you've got a 10-year-old kid trying to figure out why this, demon is telling him something's about to smash him because he can't see it. And the minute he takes him to the other side, there's this massive like minotaur demon that's smashing this kid's bed, and just terrifying the crap out of him because he's 10 years old. But at the same time, he's got that ooh factor, right? Because at 10 years old, we loved everything cool, right? If it was a giant minotaur, it's super cool. So we want to see it. So he's literally like turning to look at this giant monster, that's like,
supposedly supposed to be smashing him.
Right. And he's like,
it would have smashed me, but hey, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man. You know what I mean? But then at that same time, there's a situation where he's about to curse and he doesn't know if it's okay. He's like, I don't know. Even though nobody's around, I don't know if it's okay for me to do that, versus, Cade, the monster under the bed who's shooting birds and talking shit to the Minotaur the whole time, so it's not a kid's book, but at the same time, it's for us at heart, those of us that grew up in the 80s and the 90s and had those, like I said, the Mighty Maxes and all these other things. Cade is like Little Monsters, man.
Little Monsters,
like
yeah.
Little Monsters. If you enjoyed it, I mean, that's the best reference I can possibly give you for the book.
That's exactly what I was thinking when he said, he was under his bed, then he's like, hey, let me take you to the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
It's very much darker than Howie Mandel in the 80s, you know what I mean? Or 90s. I think it was early 90s that came out. But it's very, very much darker than Howie Mandel and Fred Savage. But at the same time, I think that as society, we've changed so much, that a story like that, although there comes my monster. Are you going to bed? All right, love you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. But love you too, Eden. So there's this concept, where it's like we have to change with the times as well. Like as a kid, we were allowed out at night. We wouldn't come in till it was like super dark. You know, we're not playing with our friends, riding our bikes and all this stuff. Versus nowadays, I wouldn't let my kid out to do that because I don't trust society in the world. So when things happen in Greed, you know, Cade and Oz are like, hey, look, we need to go out and adventure and see what's going on. Gotta wait till mom and dad are asleep. You know what I mean? Because we know I'm not gonna be allowed out to do that. So it's a lot like having the devil on your shoulder, but having no angel to assist. You know, is it okay that I go do this? You know, we've got a bunch of really cool stuff going on with this book, and it resonates with me as a person. Like, you know, April, she did this really cool cover where they were Oz and Kate are under the bed, and man, to me, I was like, man, I loved forts and stuff, right? I love doing that kind of thing. And, you know, there were times when I was scared, I'd go under my bed with my flashlight and I'd have like my teddy bear under there. I would never tell my buddies I had a teddy bear at 10 years old, but you know, I had the teddy bear under the bed. I was chilling under the bed because it was safe.
Or if you're like my parents, they had these really wicked Halloween masks, and you know they'd come in at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday when you wake up, and they're like, bleh, and you're like, oh my god, and you got your favorite. Mine was the puppy pound. I had one of those brown pound puppies, and I called him Hush Puppy from
right on
from dang it, Lamb Chop. I called him Hush Puppy, and I it's so crazy that they brought those back because I was in Target the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, Pound Puppy. You know, I used to have. I remember mine. It was a little brown one, and so I seen it. I was like, man, I want to buy one just because.
Absolutely, but that's what they feed off that the nostalgia of it, you know, and it's awesome. You know, I'm literally going, this is the coolest idea for a cover. I appreciate you came up with it because I should have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, April Rain is awesome. You know, so it's really and her cover's phenomenal.
So good, so good. Like I have this thing where I just let the artists do what they want on covers because it's fun. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, have a good time. Because to me, that's your vision. That's what you see of our characters, and that's what you're on the team for. Bring us what you see because you have an amazing imagination. Let's see what you've got. Book 2 is gonna go ham. I mean, book 2 is already crazy ham with Chuck Pinot editing it, and we've got Justin Hunt's coming on for covers, David Faught's coming on for covers. I mean, just an awesome group of folks. But we're reaching out and we're showing people that it's not a kid's book. You know, the first one we let you guys have. Oh, such a cool cover. We let you guys have it a little bit, right? We let you have the aspect of the kid and it's fun and whatnot. But book 2, man, it's going ham. I mean, we're adding Lilith. Oh man, Guile, man, that was good. And there's Manny and David, Manny and Manuel Soto and David Acampo. They're my interior team. That's their cover. Awesome folks. I can't. Well, there's David's cover alone. Really, really cool stuff. I mean, Rich Parada, love Rich Parada. He's a great guy. He's got the Incontesti going on right now. That's Eric Viola's cover. He is my interior artist, as well as one of my cover artists for the listener. Great guy.
I love the Rick and Morty stuff.
Yeah, Frank Forty came in and smashed that, man. I was really excited to have him on board. I just could not even believe that he was involved. Like when Phil was like, I'm gonna get Frank Forty, I was like, no, you're not. And he was like, yeah, I'm gonna get Frank Forty. And because Phil was an editor on this book and
what?
I don't know. I don't know. So when
Pound Puppy.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
The Pound Puppy logo.
On your butt. I was like, I don't know.
I was like, what are you talking about?
You got something to share with us, buddy. Yeah. So, and there's Becky's cover was a lot of fun. David colored that. So that particular cover, it took me back to like where the Wild Things are almost. That style, and I thought that was a lot of fun. It was a great time. But everybody brings their own unique style to the covers for this book, and I actually lowered all the prices on this particular, when we went to this particular book, because for the listener, my books are between $15 and $30 and $35 a piece, depending on the artists that are involved. But I was trying to find what stuck with people with Greed, like because it's a learning experience. Whenever you do a new IP, right? You're coming out with something new. I'm absolutely floored. I think as of like an hour ago, we're $30 from funded.
Yep.
I'm like, holy crap. You know what I mean? And it's cool because you see a lot of people that are coming from our fan base, over to it. But at the same time, it's still new. They don't know if that's the type of book that the listener is. You know what I mean? How do we feel about it? And I applaud people, and I'm thankful, for you trying something different, because it is different. But like when we bring in Justin Hunt and David Fought, and we're gonna let April go ham, so you're gonna get some NSFW covers for this book because we're introducing Lilith, and Lilith is a main character in our series. So I was like, well, we'll go real gentle and we'll ease into this IP real quick. We'll show some people some cool stuff. Now, it won't ever be NSFW with Oz on a cover. So I want that out there and understood before anybody asks. Oz is based on my 2-year-old you guys just saw. That was Ozzy. That literally, that's his name. He literally came running in here and was like, hey, good night. And so it was a conversation between my wife and I about what we could do that would be really interesting with this character Lilith, because, if you go back and you look at the origins of the character, and all the other iterations that have come out for this character, we were like, well, I can't very well make her a nun. You know what I mean? So she's got to come out. She's got to be nitty. She's got to be gritty. My wife calls it the bad bitch syndrome. And she's got it, and it's a lot of fun. And the guys are putting it together right now. So I'm really hyped about that. Page 1 actually starts tomorrow. We just got edits for the script from Chuck the other day. We fixed what we needed to do. We're ready to go. And then, oh man, it's just been so much fun. It's just been so much fun. Like Greed right now, we just showed it a little bit ago. We just added it on the Kickstarter. It's not colored yet. David has it this weekend. It's the Mortal Kombat variant, the cosplay variant. And people were like, why aren't there spikes or lava on the ground or anything under the pit? And I was like, man, if you have children and you've ever stepped on a Lego block, let me tell you.
It's worse than
spikes. It is
so
much worse. It is so much worse. Because you hop because you think you've moved out of the way, but there's 50 more that you didn't know were there.
Let me tell you, I stepped on Pikachu the other day, and I thought I about died because them pointy ears went straight through the middle, right into that nerve in my foot.
Yeah.
And I just, I'm going to have to give about 50 Hail Marys after what I spouted off after stepping on it, And then I'm like, I'm done. This is it. This is it for me.
Absolutely.
I'm taken out by a little 1-inch Pikachu figurine.
I made it through without cancer, then Pikachu got me.
Pikachu took me down.
Right. And that's what's fun. It's like I can give you guys these nuances and this nostalgia factor with this book because it's more relatable to some people than the listener is. And that's what's fun about it. It's interesting to be able to give you guys the over-the-top fights. You know what I mean? The almost not superhero fights, but I can give you these, and I can't say magical because I've avoided that like the plague for the listener and for Greed. Well, not that I don't like Magic. I do, and very much. I think it's interesting stuff, and I love Magic the Gathering. I love, all kinds of. There's probably 100, fantasy novels upstairs on my bookshelves, But it's the same time. I didn't want to catch myself in a trope. Because if you look in mythology, there's no mention of actual magic. You know what I mean? If you look in theology, there's, it's basically smoke and mirrors type of deal. So I wanted to be able to give people effects and stuff that would be interesting. Like if you came across a Minotaur, it would physically be daunting. It's huge, it's massive, it's muscular, it can smash things. That's it. He's not like blasting people with fireballs or anything. He's big ass Minotaur that's going to smash you if you get too close to it.
Yeah,
the size of it. But but I wanted to give people cool effects and stuff, and I wanted to show people really neat things like that. So there's a lot of fighting that's over the top, real fun, real gory stuff, just like the listener is. But I don't put Oz in the combat, right? He's like the coach. You got Cade in the middle of fighting demons and stuff. with Oz back coaching him, you know, when he starts to get his own sea legs almost, because the character is still like, I don't know anything about this stuff. You know, this is terrifying. How is this even happening to me right now? You know, what are my parents going to think, you know, when they find the kitchen door has been completely ripped off its hinges, you know what I mean? You know, and all that stuff was important that we added character building, even for the parents, you know, what they're going to react. Even, so one cool thing about the other side is anything that occurs over there affects like the real world. Okay.
Like, so like the Minotaur the monster smashing his bed is happening in the real world, but he can't see the monster. And then that's like you said, when he takes him over, he sees it and he's just like in awe. But in reality, that Minotaur smashing his bed on the other side was smashing his bed in the real world.
Absolutely. So it was an interesting way for us to storytell with the listener as well, because it's like I said, it's the same way in both of those books. So we wanted to give you Eric paints, Viola paints all his pages, and I wanted to show how beautiful the color sets were for his pages. That's why I did the black, white, gray backgrounds. Hey, Mike, how's it going, man? I really wanted to give you guys something that you could look at and enjoy visually as much as your story that you're getting, you know, and I love it. I had to have something that could compare. So all these pages pop. They're all beautiful, but now you've got black and white, and then all your characters are in color on the other side. And I just thought that was the coolest way to do it. And then when we went to Greed, David came up with this really cool concept of adding like a blue hue to it and this wavy effect. So it would make things, hey Trish, it would make things that much more interesting. You know what I mean? It made it pop that much more, you know, versus blacks and whites or grays, versus the style that we were doing for the particular book. Man, watching these guys in these combat sequences and stuff that you guys are going to be getting shortly was bananas. Like, it was bananas. So like when we did the listener, it was like the first couple issues are realistic takes on combat. You know, it's soldiers and big Bowie knives and machetes and, you know, tomahawks, you know, and wolves and just gore all over the place. But it was very true to the time period, you know, like all the weapons, everything, all the way they talk, all that stuff is true to the time period, right? So when we get into book 3 of the listener, at the end of book 2, you start seeing the other side, you know, for the first time. And with Greed, though, we threw you into it at the very beginning, you know, because it was like, you're going to see a lot more of the other side in Greed than you do the listener. Because I have a 10-year-old kid and I have to give him a way to get around without being seen, you know, because you can see people in the living realm from the other side, but you can't vice versa, you know what I mean? Unless you're a god or a demon or a demigod or something like that. And I think it's very interesting, you know, like the second book takes place in the mall, you know, after hours. And it was like, well, how do you get in the mall after hours without being seen or without tripping an alarm or something? Well, you go to the other side, now you're in the mall, you know, and you still have to open the door, you know what I mean? So they had to find a way in without getting caught, you know, when they were closing the mall and whatnot. But it's interesting to me to be able to throw these nuances. Is you got this kid that's going, man, I really need to get home. And Kate is like, no, wait, we're just going to be a little bit. Don't worry about it. You know what I mean? It's going to be okay. And he's like, I'm going to get grounded for like life right now, you know? And those are cool things to me, because I remember being a kid. I remember, you know, going to the mall. I remember playing arcade machines for hours on end.
Oh, man.
Tekken tournaments and everything else that we used to hang out, Street Fighter tournaments, whatever, what have you.
Rampage World Tour.
Man, how much money I lost on Golden Axe. You know what I mean?
Oh, my gosh, yeah.
You know,
and now you can play it on the PlayStation. You get infinite lives. And, you know.
Absolutely.
It's like, man, I remember when I wasted a whole $10 roll of quarters on
right, absolutely. And I think that's a lot of fun, and I think that people can relate to that. Like, there are stores in our book that are loosely based on real stores. You know, nowadays that malls are sort of falling apart, you're not seeing those stores as much, but they're there. Like, you know, Victoria's Secret. We've got a store based on Victoria's Secret, and it's run by succubuses in our book, you know, and
Well, and it's funny. Earlier you mentioned Suncoast Comics and
Mhm.
comic shop, and I remember Suncoast, the movie store. You know, I don't know how many
absolutely.
times I would
Absolutely.
go into Suncoast, and you would reserve a VHS copy of a movie,
Right.
and you would go there, and every once in a while, like Walmart, did for a long time. Kids these days don't realize. We would go wait in line until midnight when these, hit movies would
Yeah.
release just to get them.
Yeah.
Or the same thing with video games,
Yeah.
Oh, we got a midnight release. I can't wait. You're
Yeah.
camping out and waiting
Now you
in
got your
line.
downloads. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
now you
download it
can
now.
download it a month before, and then
Yeah.
the night it releases, you get the key that unlocks it, and you're like, boom,
Absolutely.
you
I
go
just
into
found Mass Effect the other day. The
yeah, yeah.
remaster for Mass Effect. Yeah. But all that is part of our childhood, and that's what we grew up with. And I think that, like I said, I loved Supernatural till we
Oh
got to
yeah,
season 4, and then I was like, nope, I'm done. And I liked it after that, but it was like, meh, it doesn't have that same. I like the hunting werewolves. I like the hunting vampires. I
yeah.
like the
Well,
zombies.
we're on our second run of Supernatural. We're on season 9, probably gearing towards the end, but we started watching season 14, and then the final season dropped, and I'm like, man, I don't remember what happened in like the last 8 seasons. And the other problem is my wife would watch probably the first season and a half
Mhm.
of the. So I came in late, and I didn't know all the stuff about
Yeah,
their mom and everything. So I'm like, why don't we just start it over, and then we'll watch it all the way through until the final
yeah,
season. And so I'm excited to finish it. It's you were talking earlier. You're like doing all these research on all these creatures and
yeah.
gods and demigods and stuff. And all I could imagine was like you being like Sam, in the men of letters bunker with a stack of books piled
Absolutely.
this
That's
high.
what it was like, man. Oh my god, it was awful. It was real bad. It was real bad for like November. November
Yeah.
was awful at my house because I literally we were doing the Kickstarter. We were getting ready to end the first one, and I was literally like, so I have 800 comic long boxes in my house. All right, so
Oh my gosh.
like my office upstairs is jacked up because there's so much stuff, and then you come downstairs and now my theater has like got long boxes behind me and to the side of me and stuff. My wife's ready to kill me about it, but that happened with these big thick volumes of the Bible and all kinds of other shenanigans. But it was really really interesting to learn things I didn't know about, especially with like Celtic lore and Greek mythology, stuff that I thought I knew about and knew nothing about.
So did you include like one of the questions I had? Did you have any like Egyptian gods that are in there?
Absolutely.
So
So
you
I don't
have
know if you're.
Anubis and
So are you familiar? Well, so you know Anubis, okay? All right. So Anubis is actually not the first version of the black dog that came out.
really?
Wet was the very first version of that character. Just like you have the different versions of Christianity through as time went by, you have the same in other religions. So in my book, Wet is a different character than Anubis, and like I said, I'm 30 something, 39 scripts in now for the listener. So it's like it's like we joke about having that the burden of knowledge. We want to talk about so many awesome things that are going on, but we're like, meh. But the black dog is in my book. Wet is in my book. He's a very popular character, and because of Anubis. Anubis is very popular. So I was like, if I'm going to use a god of death, I need to use one that's known, but at the same time, I want to make it original to my stories,
Yeah.
one that people wouldn't know as well. You know what I mean? But they can learn about him. And oh, I know about him through him because he has a different name in this group of people that believe this, and yeah, man, all over the place. Egyptian gods, the 4 horsemen are big in my book. The 7 deadly sins are big in my book. We just put out a 30-book run of what's called Guy's Journal. Gaji is one of our main characters, and I wrote this. Oh my gosh, it was such a thing to put out. So I put out comic books, right? I've never put out anything like this. So it was, and I haven't put out a lot of books. Okay, so people can beat me up all you want, but I haven't put out a lot. But I did something different. I was trying something different. Gabriella painted 27 paintings. And what I did was I took her paintings and then I gave her concepts of characters, right? She didn't have to use my concepts. She made these amazing loosely based paintings on my concepts. And then I went and I wrote full short stories for her paintings. So it's a painting, a short story, a painting, a short story, painting, a short story. And it's not just on comic book paper. Like I went and instead of having a white background, painted background, whatever, we got these really cool like burnt paper, and it's all typed on this really cool looking burnt paper type of deal.
That's
so
cool.
It was so much fun. The only thing I didn't get to do with that was leather bind it, and I really wanted to, but it was ridiculously expensive. You know what I mean? It was ridiculous. Now I didn't have stick figure sketches, but I tell you what I did do. Speaking of stick figure sketches, for that book, I got a buddy that's son is younger, and he's got and he was worried that he wouldn't ever be able to be published. And I had him do us 2 pieces for our characters, and I put them in the book and I published it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so we did that, and we also did a piece from my buddy Oscar. We put it in there. It was such an experience, but at the same time, after your Kickstarter, you're putting this together. I'm not used to after Kickstarter, okay? I do it all beforehand. So when it was like, Gabby was like, "Are you serious? We're going to do this many paintings?" I was like, "Let's knock out all these paintings, and then I'm going to write all this," right? So you write it all, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, we're at 48 pages now," And I was like, "Well, I can't. I'm going to put it as like a special thing for the Kickstarter. If it was $50, which is more than I've ever charged, but at the same time, it was almost 50 pages. So I was like, let's do this, and it did well. You know what I mean? I only have a few orders left that I can actually fulfill of it. I'll do the print run that I promised I would do with it. But man, it was so much fun. But it came out literally like short story from my character's point of view, like telling you how to deal with these characters in these situations. And it was a lot of fun. Great time.
That's awesome.
There's all kinds of shenanigans with different beings. We've got a short story coming out at the beginning of next year called Death, He Who Walks Among You. And it's about the horseman Death, why he's the most powerful horseman, how the current horseman became the horseman, because all these characters tie together. Like Cade plays a much bigger role in everything that we're putting out there, because when it all comes together, it's called the Sin War that we've already written. All this stuff's been, like I said, we're already way past it, but it's like the Sin War comes up. You've got this, this little dude that's caught in the middle of all this stuff going on. Plus you've got the listener trying to kill him at the same time. The noble spirits are trying to kill him at the same time while they're fighting the seven deadly sins, while the 4 horsemen are in the middle of it, because the 4 horsemen are trying to kill the listener because they believe that he's not neutral anymore. He's supposed to be neutral. He's a neutral demigod. And which we haven't even got into all that, but that's why they're trying to kill him, because they believe he's breaking the neutrality, versus it's the sins that are siphoning souls.
Man, I love the lore of the four horsemen.
Yeah,
Darksiders was such an awesome game.
Absolutely.
And I was excited for Darksiders Genesis when it came out, because it's got multiplayer. And so the wife and I have been playing that. But man, I absolutely love Darksiders when it came out.
The characters are so good. The game is great. The concepts are good. The play style is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I'm one that, so these characters all needed to be fleshed out. If I was going to write about them, they had to be fleshed out. So there are 100+ characters in our world within Greed, within the listener, that are fully fleshed out. From Lee, who shows up in Greed in the next couple issues, who, like I said, showed up in the very first issue of the listener, a young Chinese girl who is now a mid-30s. Why hasn't she aged more than that? You know what I mean? How does she have a noble spirit? All these things, where is the listener? So all that stuff ties into Greed, whereas it's like a side story, like it's happening in the background of these 2 characters, what they're dealing with and what they're going through, whereas Cade's trying to get in the middle of find out everything that's going on, because he knows a lot, he's big into it. Whereas Oz is just like, I don't know what you're dragging me along for, or what's happening right now. that's badass. That's terrifying. You know what I mean? So it's a lot of fun, you know, and these nuances, like we did panels and sketching in school, you know, because we know good and well that a lot of us sat and doodled instead of paying attention. You know what I mean? So, and I think that's fun, you know, showing, you know, a child's perspective and how they feel in these things, you know, and how would a god react to a 10-year-old child, you know? How is Cuchulainn, you know, this massive Celtic, you know, warrior god going to react to this 10-year-old kid, and who we are told is a monster under the bed? How is he going to react to this when he runs into it? You know, our first big story arc starts in book 3. We use some character building in book 1 and book 2, and then we get into it, man. We get into it elbows deep, and I'm excited about it.
So is mythology and theology always something that you've been real heavy into, or is this something that you like picked up with doing the books? You're just like, man, I want to do this and do this right, and then you just kind of fell deep into it.
I've always been very open in my beliefs, you know. But when I met Les, like in my later in life, you know, I knew him when I was a kid, but when I met him later in life, it was like I didn't know shit. You know what I mean? And I thought I did. You know, like I said, we all think we're educated, you know. So I was like, man, I know about this, you know, whatever. I've got the 411 on that and all kinds of stuff. But it's like all I grew up with was around different forms of Christianity. You know what I mean? And I always thought other belief systems were interesting, and I paid attention, you know, to the Celtic stuff. And that was about it, because it was real close to me. You know what I mean? And the Native American stuff, my grandmother was big into it, and she would go to tribal meets and stuff like that. But I never got really big into it because I wasn't around that side of my family as much, you know. And but Les started talking about stuff that we bring up, stuff like the fact that he didn't like mirrors. He didn't keep them in his house. You know, there are reasons that he didn't keep them in his house. Like certain people believe that you see the truth within yourself, the other side of yourself, when you look into a mirror.
Yeah, and then there's the mythology that if you look into a mirror, it steals your soul. And
absolutely, you know, absolutely. And a lot of that stuff, like Les didn't even have like mirrors on his trucks. What's going on, Steph? How are you? Yeah, he didn't even have like, you know, like rear view mirrors or anything in his truck. You know what I mean? And he wouldn't even leave like the retirement community. He'd go to the store like on the corner, and that was it. You know. And there were just other things, you know, how he thought about, you know, canines, and how he felt about wolves, and how he felt about, you know, your family and history and everything like that, and gods that he believed in, you know. And, you know, like walking with the Great Spirit was a big deal for him, you know, and hunting with the Great Spirit, and, you know, how you would talk to people, how you wouldn't use their names. You'd call them older brother or younger brother, you know what I mean? And all these really interesting factors that I had no information about at all, you know, and I got from talking to him, and it just became more interesting. And I was like, well, if I'm going to bring in one theology, I have to bring them all in, because we don't live in this secular world. You know what I'm saying? Man, you know, I appreciate that I may look younger than I am. I hope, you know, there are days when I'm like, man, I really got to tone down the beard, cut the hair a little bit, you know. But there's a lot to be said about things that we don't know, you know, and religions and stuff that we don't know anything about, as well as mythological characters that we don't know anything about. And I thought it was fun because it was like, well, if I'm going to do it right, you know. So if there's a hurricane, you know, over here, it's because this god was angry and this is going on, you know. And I was like, man, I'm going to integrate Maui. You know, I lived in Hawaii for 2 years. I'm going to start throwing in some other deities I know a little bit about. So I'm going to go research these characters and learn as much as I can about them. You know, like Maui is a big deal for us in our book. Oh my gosh. I don't drink that nonsense. Get out of here. No, man, that's not me. That's Jim. That's not me. So, but you know, it was like, add these characters. Who can we bring in? You know, and as like a horseman, you know, what would be a really cool horseman? How are they horsemen? What would make sense in this world that we live in now? What would make a horseman? You know, so I had this cool idea, like, good Lord, that's not a horseman. Not in my world anyway. So, so there's this concept of like recruitment. Oh no. So, man, look here. He says that, but the minute I send him this awesome artwork that Jim and I are working on for this new IP, he's gonna want to do a cover. Bet it's gonna be no, yeah, maybe. I'll give him that one. He can have that one. That's fair. I like the hair on that one. Get out of here. Yeah, right? If that doesn't excite you about art, I don't know what will. Yeah, it excites me about art. Oh no. It was cool to find out, to give backstory to these characters. Like, why would they be a horseman?
Yeah.
And how did Lucifer recruit them to be horsemen? What's the deal with the 7 deadly sins? How did they get to be sins? How do sins come about? Sins are immortal in our book. Their body may die, but they find another vessel. One of the wildest things I did that I thought, and it scared me. So I wrote one character that scared me, and it was a lot of fun. And it's Wrath. Wrath terrified me. He's going to be a big main character in Greed coming up shortly. I think he can rock it. Get out of here, man. I think he can rock it. I can't with that. That one, no, I'm done. You win. Russell, you win, man. I can't mess with that one. But there was a lot to be said about these characters, and when I came to it, I was like, how could I make it scary? And well, I went back to the listener, and I was reading, and I was trying to figure out what was scary about the book and what was really, would really grab people's attention. And I was like, all right, well, Nazis are scary, right?
Yeah.
Like really scary, like no bullshit. Like the concept of Nazism is terrifying, And I was like, all right. So I wrote this story. It was a mini story for Gee's Journal about Wrath. And it's about this young boy that willingly accepts being possessed because he hates people. He willingly accepts it. So he's like an 8-year-old kid that becomes possessed by Wrath. And he's lived till now because he's possessed. And he's like dressed in the Nazi garb, you know what I mean? Rocking the whole deal, like mini Hitler type of thing. And I was like, this is a terrifying character, right? Like I've created this kid that's killing children his own age and stuff, and then kills his parents. And that's how his, he comes about into existence. And he gets into it, and he becomes a major, antagonist for Oz, because Oz is entirely different. He's very open and excited about the world, where you've got this character that wants to just destroy everything. The Jersey Circler is killing the vampires. Good grief. But it's cool though, because we gauge, like, and it's easy to use the term power level. I'll use that at power level, right? Because we use it based on beliefs. Like, if you're a god that nobody believes in anymore, you're not real tough anymore. You know what I mean? Like, Kukulain's real cool, but he doesn't have like believers like Christ would have. You know what I mean? Or Zeus would have, or once we get into stuff like that. And so he's literally, but whereas the 7 deadly sins are believed virtually all over the world that exists, So you got Wrath going at it with Kukulain in book 3, and it's going to be really, really cool, to see what it's like to see this young kid going at it with this Celtic like war god. You know what I mean? So
I'm sure Stuff's got a big question. So are there any Leviathans in this?
So Leviathans are definitely, I don't know why you're asking. I'm sure that's a loaded question somewhere. I'm sure it is. So
it was Supernatural. He says that's the worst season. And he's like, you can skip the Leviathan season of Supernatural.
Yeah, I didn't get, truthfully, like, I didn't get into Leviathans with the listener or with Greed yet in our world, because it was like, I felt like it was so played out. You know what I'm saying? Even when you get into like Greek mythology and stuff, it was like I didn't want to get into the Titans. There were so many things that we could do. I agree 100%. There were so many, like I said, I really enjoyed like the first 4 seasons. Like, I loved like the first 4 seasons, and after that I was pretty much, I watched it because it's like you had something to watch. You know what I'm saying? It was like, it was cool, whatever. But there are certain characters that I felt like I didn't think we needed. You know what I mean? Like we get into Wendigo, we get into the Skinwalkers, we get into, like I said, the Chupacabra, we get into Llorona, werewolves, Phaeolods, which was the original Irish werewolf.
Are there any blue balls, like any will-o-wisps or anything like that?
Yeah, will-o-wisps are awesome. I don't know about
Sweet.
blue balls, but you start buying those covers from book 2 and you might get a few. I'm just saying. Especially if Steph does a cover, we'll see how that goes.
It's the name of my my review show, Blue Balls Reviews. So
that's awesome. I had no idea. How cool is that?
that
segue.
Yeah, that was the segue for that. It's just the way you're talking about this, it kind of reminds me of do they explode? Gotta go, guys. Have a great night. Have a good one, Ed. So yeah, it was kind of a segue into that, just because it's funny because Sean Forney and his wife put together the Scarlet's Field Guide to Cryptids and Other Creatures. And awesome. They had the Will-o'-the-Wisp in there, and it was blue, and it was a blue ball. So I kept asking them every week when they were doing their live draw, I'm like, is there any exploding blue balls?
Oh, no. That's hilarious.
So, of course, since Danny D's here and all its fashion, I had to ask if there was any, exploding blue balls.
Right on. I like wisps. I think wisps are very interesting. One thing that you'll find, and I can throw blue at you real easy. So the listener, when he sees noble spirits, and we have 4 of them in our book currently, they're blue. Like in the living realm, he would see them as blue and white characters, like of energy. Yeah. And that's how we use them, and it's really cool. Like I said, because when you go into the other side, so when you go into the other side, it's all, blacks and whites and grays, but the characters are natural colors, like as if they were alive, natural colors. But when you're in the living realm, they're blue and white, because it's only the listener that can see them, and that's how he perceives them. Just like I mentioned, the Frighteners, always thought that was really interesting. The concept of the character and how he interacted with them. You know what? I could imagine that. I imagine nowhere else that will actually happen. Mad funny though. But yeah, man, it's blue is there, colors there. I love the whole gods and deities thing now more than I ever have.
Man, that's what was so much fun about the newest God of War, of how they did the Bifrost, and they brought in all of the other deities and the different realms, and it was phenomenal how they put everything together. And
I appreciate that stuff. I'm actually, Steph, right now, Jim and I and Joe are working on an amazing story. As it gets further on, I'll shoot you some details on it. I'm sure Jim will eventually reach out as we get further into it. But it's very different than the stuff I'm doing right now. That's why whole different animal type of deal, so I'll definitely get you in on it, man. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And I appreciate that, because I feel like if I do stories half-ass or I do characters half-ass, it's just not worth doing them. Right?
Well, and that's the thing, with talking, with you tonight about, your research into all the deities and the different mythologies is just, it's awesome to see somebody that puts that much work instead of just, oh, well, I'm going to base this off of, I seen Supernatural, so this is what they look like on there, so I'm going to do it. You're actually painting your own picture of these are what the characters look like in my eyes based on references from all these different books. You didn't, like you said, you didn't Wikipedia. This isn't just like, what some random stranger wrote up on what a Will-o'-the-Wisp is or Wendigo or anything. Well, you looked it up.
I appreciate that. I think that one of the, Chupacabra is easy, because Chupacabra was one of, and it's going to blow your mind, bro. I promise you. So we postponed pinning because we were simply too confused with the story. Just saying. Story of, I'm sorry, I'm confused now.
I am too. Backstory better than background.
So as you create backstory for your characters, I feel like that you have to make it more exciting than the original background because you've already seen it, right? So if I write about Wendigos, I it's all from, you know, when Navajo were very secretive about a lot of things, and this is the only time you guys will hear me talk about tribes because I don't believe in it. I don't like the tribalism effect of things because I believe that everybody needs to be respected, just like any other groups of people. But I do think that when you create a backstory for a character that's already been done, you have to outshine the original story because of the fact that it's, like I said, if I give you the Wendigo now that was the original story, it's kind of like, oh, well, like I mentioned, desensitized. It's not scary to us anymore. We've seen it. We've seen too many movies. We've seen too many stories, for it to be scary. So I had to update things
Yeah.
to make them scary for a modern
Well, it's just like
world.
Rambo. When Rambo originally came out, it was just like, holy crap, this is bloody, gory, violent. This is insane. And now you watch the, Rambo and you laugh at it because it's like, it's child games now. You've seen so much violence.
Was it one of my books, Danny? You didn't.
He's talking about one of the other books that I reviewed. He was
Oh.
saying he totally derailed onto something else. He
Gotcha.
said we have postponed pinning because we were simply too confused with the story. He was just talking about one of the books we did a while back because it was different.
Gotcha. So like, I think that the Chupacabra is the easiest to use because it's the one that we changed the most. So, oh gosh. So anyway, so you've got this concept, right, of this goat sucking being, like it would look like a dog, you know what I mean, something like that. But I was like, how do I make it scarier? So when I sent it to David Acampo, I was like, hey, look, give me like a velociraptor with Mayan undertones, right? Like gold and feathers and all kinds of really cool stuff. And we wrote it as if it was kidnapping children. And we wrote the story from the perspective of the child that was kidnapped. And then after she dies, she goes asking the listener for help to save these souls that are bound by Lorona. Because I wrote it as a symbiotic system, almost a hive mind. So Lorona, in her small area, has a group of chupacabra. We call them the chupa raptors. You know what I mean? Inside joke about it, but it's like they go out and they bring children to her, which she devours. You guys are actually going to get a Marissa Pope cover for the next book, which is a villains cover, because we're going to start doing villains for our books, covers for each book coming out. And it'll have Lorona on it. And she has a very reptilian effect to her that we made that was different. So they need to be different. They need to be interesting, whereas I mentioned Feolod's earlier, which was the original Irish werewolf. That's where the story began. The oldest story started in Ireland. That's exactly what I did, Steph. I made a book called Guy's Journal, and that's exactly what I did. The only thing it doesn't have is stats for our tabletop game. And I've actually got a copy of that. I'm going to send you the PDF of that, Steph, so you can check it out. It was a lot of fun. And I'll send, I got to send Russell some stuff too, just to thank him for having us on here. And I'll send you the PDFs for Guy's Journal and whatnot. But so it became this, like, how could I make it scarier for people? So the Chupacabra had to be more terrifying. I wrote it from the angle, like I said, of the young girl that was kidnapped. Then she goes to the listener, and long story short is, I agree, absolutely. The listener delves into things, not only like PTSD and, nightmares and stuff like that, but we also go into alcoholism and how it affected people at that point in time, how it devastated the Native American community. And we write that in, like, so the listener's father was the listener before him. It's a bloodline trait. That's how they gain the ability. And it's just hereditary, and his father didn't want to be the listener, so he ignores it. He ignores all the people, all the spirits around him, and doesn't help anyone or anything. So when this girl comes to Addie and asks for help, she's like, I really didn't think you'd help me because there have been children here for 30 years that have needed to be set free. But every time they reached out to the listener, he ignored them. So I thought it was really cool to bring in, alcoholism and what it does to you, like, because it's like Professor X, right? Professor X can hear everybody everywhere around him unless he tunes it out, and that's how we treat the listener. Like, the listener can see and hear the dead all over the place and you can't cut it off. Well, Addie Sr. was cutting it off with alcoholism, and so when they come for him, which they inevitably do come for the older, his father, and that's how he becomes the listener. They come for him, and when they do, none of the noble spirits are going to help him because he's been ignoring people for so long. And I think that's a lot of fun. I think the storytelling is super dark, super rigid, and I enjoy that. Like I said, and that's what makes greed, because greed is a much more lighthearted take on the same, type of world. How does a 10-year-old act versus a 30-year-old soldier? How does it, how do you react when all of a sudden this like Asian chick comes out of nowhere, wielding like two big ass Bowie knives and is talking about, hey, there's a demon behind you. You're 10 years old. You're just like, what are you doing with the big knives? You know what I mean? Can you put them away now? Or when Lilith comes up and she's like, hey, I can teach you how to be a man. And you're just like, no, you need to go away or I'm going to go tell somebody. You know what I mean? Stranger danger type of deal at 10 years old. Please don't mess with me. So those are fun topics. And I think that the teams are killing it right now. I think the story speaks for itself. The greatest compliment I've gotten so far was I was sold when it was in my hand, and I think that's when we did ICC last month. I was the only writer there, and everything else was Star Wars basically, and there was like one other comic shop there, and I had a guy come up to me, and he was like, "Holy shit, you have book 2." And I was like, "Yeah, man." You know what I mean? I didn't know if I'd ever spoken to him or anything, but he bought book 1 from Kyle. And I'm like, it's a small world, right? Like, it's a real small world. So for you, like I said, I started doing this in October of last year, like selling my book, so you come up out of nowhere. I just moved to Tennessee, not even a whole year ago yet. So you come up and you're like, hey, I bought your book. And I'm just like, the fuck? That's amazing, So, and he's like grabbing his wife, telling him we've got book 2 on the table. I couldn't have been more ecstatic than if I'd had another child born at that point in time.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've got this child that you've been working on, and it's like your heart and soul. You're doing all this research, and you're pumping all of this story out there, and to have somebody have that kind of reaction, to walk up to your table and be like, hey, we got book 2 now, and they're excited to be able to continue the story.
Yeah.
Dude, that's saying something. I mean, that's what we write these stories for. That's what it's all about, is to get people excited, give them something to take them away from their world, take them away from the bad in their life, give them 15, 20 minutes of solace while they read this story that they're totally engrossed in. And
for sure.
And it's, to have that reaction from somebody is just breathtaking. It's humbling, because it's like, this is why I do what I do, because people enjoy it.
Absolutely. I think the most powerful thing in this industry is the fan. Like, I agree, Steph, but my mom and dad live here, and I haven't lived near them in like 20 years. So it was like, you know what? It's time to be around, So, and like I said, Heather and I do this for a living, and Heather works from home too. So it's like, it was cool. How's it going, Katrina? But there was, there's something to be said about the real fan, like the real fan, and not the fair weather fans or anybody like that, or the speculative thing. And that's cool. That makes the industry, right? And I get that. It's important to have them. And I'm thankful for even the speculative market, super thankful. But when somebody sends you a message, like you've done Kickstarters, Russ. So it's like, so if someone sends you a message and you haven't had a sale in 2 or 3 days on your Kickstarter, you're starting to feel a little bummed out, right? We all get it. The rain starts dropping a little bit. You start getting a little, but when a fan can come in and message you and go, they're really excited. They're really excited about your book. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing the right thing. And it's something, man. It's something powerful. It's something that you could never explain to anybody if they hadn't been on that end of it, You're muted, brother.
Steph, have you ever looked at a map before? I mean, come on, Carrie, get Steph a map. If you didn't know, Steph, Tennessee is connected to Missouri. Come on, man. You just
Hey,
dissed yourself.
I I I am I've lived in Florida, Virginia, St. Thomas, and Hawaii. And I'll say this. If my parents didn't live in Tennessee, it would have not been a choice for us to move to Tennessee. Um, well, to be fair, at least they've got Ocean View property in New Jersey. So that's all I'm going to say about that. There's at least that.
But yeah, man, there's nothing worse. Like you were saying, the lull.
Yeah.
I hit with my second campaign. I hit like a 12-day lull.
Yeah.
And it was like it went 3 days, and then I had a dropped pledge, and I'm like, we funded in 11 hours, and I was like, all right, cool, we're funded. If we can maintain this, get a few here and there, that would be awesome, because the more the better things I can, better
Absolutely.
I can make the book, the more stretch goals, then stuff people I can get out there. And then like you get to that lull, and then it's like, okay, a drop pledge. It's like, all right, wait a minute, we're going backwards. Then you go 3 more days, and then there'd be a drop pledge, and it's like, oh no, what's going on? And then like you would get one more pledge. It's like, all right, we're going back up. And you're like, what's going on? But yeah, it's like you said, you have people reach out. They're like, I'm really excited for this. And there's nothing more humbling than hearing somebody say, I'm excited to read your story. It's like,
right? Like mind-blowing type of stuff, man. Like we did. So with our first book, with the listener, nobody knew who we were, right? I didn't know how to advocate for myself. I didn't know anything about Kickstarter. I'd never done anything like that. So it was like between like grassroots, half of it, and then Kickstarter, the other half, I got funded, right? So when it came to the second book, it was like, all right, we got funded. And then this one was very different. So like this one, we did 1,500 in a day and a half. And I was like, that's incredible, right? So then I went like a week and a half without anything going on. And I was like, I don't know what the deal is. So, and it's funny because you think about that though, even though Greed is in the same world, you still have the fact that it's a new IP regardless. It's a new product, whether I'm writing it or not. It may reach out to a different type of clientele. This is, the listener is in a store in the UK right now. It's not in any US stores other than Cowabunga, but it's in a store in the UK. Each issue as it comes out goes over there. Yeah, right. That's exciting.
I'm waiting on the copyright to come back. What he's talking about is I'm stoked. This will be my novel once I get it printed. It's gonna be exciting.
For sure.
To get it in your hands, to hold your baby for the first time, and to smell the fresh ink,
Yes.
and it has your name on it. It's
absolutely.
Like, I did it. You made it. And that's one thing that people need to, with writing is it's like it's not going to be everybody's forte, but it's like you're writing for yourself, and it's like just being happy with what you wrote is good, but it's also awesome when other people are excited in what you're doing.
I had I about lost it when the listener came in for the first time. Right, it was the coolest thing. Y'all are a mess. So it was absolutely like absolutely absolutely. Like I am all about my my own product and having my own product. I'm just why would we do anything that we wouldn't be a fan of?
Oh, exactly.
So when Marissa put out a cover for my first book, it was awesome, right? Mike got in touch with me about putting Marissa on it. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And then we became friends as the process went, but then when she got a female character that she could use for my second book, she went ham with it and it looked great, Now that being said, she's got fans of her own, just like Mike has got fans of his own, and everybody else has got their fans. Steph's got, a legion, and so, but it's fun because the more people you bring on, the more different type of fan you bring in, right? Because, man, look, Justin Hunt coming on, David Falk coming on, they bring their own fan groups, right? And that's what's really cool about comic books, because you start seeing who's into what, who's buying whose covers. And with Kickstarter, the cool thing is you're looking at this like graph of who's buying whose covers, who likes what. And I give Gabriella Ramos so much love. She's been my friend for almost 13 years now. She's tattooed me almost 60% of my body, and she does cover A for me for every book of the listener I put out. And her cover sells, man, more than you would ever imagine. It's like a stylistic type of choice that people get into. Like Peach Momoko came out, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, Peach Momoko came out," and it was just like, boof, everywhere. Now you got people that are like, meh, it's okay and whatnot. It's awesome. Whether I'm a fan or not doesn't make it less awesome. You know what I mean? Because art's subjective. So as we look at things like that, that makes the books. I think that everybody that did a cover for Greed did it in their own style. Same thing with the listener. Everybody that comes in, they do it their own way. I'm incredibly excited to see the next set that comes in. I've already got the listener beginnings. It starts Kickstarter the end of next month. So I've already got the covers for that done. Eric's finishing the pages now. So like I said, I like to have my projects done before the Kickstarters so you guys can get them as soon as they're done. And I realize it's not the same for everyone. You know what I'm saying? I understand that. That's how I like to do it, because I'm able to. So I do my best to make sure that that's done. Because I'm that guy that's terrified that he's going to screw up and people aren't going to get the shit, So I'm like, it needs to be done ahead of time. I had a sketch get lost last time, which really sucked, and the dude was like, "Hey, look, I need to get a refund or I need to get a different one." And I'm like, "No, I can send you a different copy of the book. I can't get you the same sketch again. That's like physically impossible for me to pull off, but I can do something cool, But yeah, so I try to get it all, situated. Porn is pretty suggestive. I wish they show more of a kind of artistic nature on Facebook. I agree. There's plenty of pages you can follow, Danny. And the thing about that, Mike, is I agree with that to a degree. Like I've always felt like that, right? Because like as a store owner, when we would do our orders, it would be listed as main cover. Cover A is always listed as the main cover. But I'll say this. I don't feel like any cover that we put out is any more main than any other cover we put out. And that's because of the fact that I view everyone as equal when they come into our team. They're like, "Hey, look, I want to do a cover. I'm going to do a cover. I'm going to do a cover." When I first put it out, I had to change my wording because I didn't do cover A, B, C, or D or anything when I first put it out. I just did it by artist cover title. You know what I mean? And when we started CGCing books, they were like, "Hey, guys, we need to know which these are." And I was like, "Okay. So let's get that situated real quick."
Just list the artist on there. We don't need a B, C, D.
Yeah, man. But I thought it was interesting because if you look at, we're in collectors as well now, which that blew my mind. Like I was like you're like, where am I at now? Is that a thing? Or we're actually with other people that, collect comic books. We're in there. We have people that are, CGCing our books and stuff, or we're, they're collecting our books. And it's an amazing feeling. And I know that there's a bunch of cats that have been doing this a really long time, and a bunch of my friends have been doing it forever. I agree with you, Danny. I absolutely agree with you. At the same time, though, as an independent publisher, we have this concept of how many we can print, right? Like when I did DeBalfo covers, it was 50 for the Virgin variant, 100 for the regular. And because I didn't know how many people would buy the book. You know what I'm saying? I never wanted to be that guy that was like, I'm going to buy a million or print a million covers of my book and then just have the book sit around in my house. You know, I never wanted to be that person.
Sorry, the kiddos are going crazy.
Oh, you're good, man. You're good. But it you know, that's what we speak about. The 1 in 50 is the 1 in 100 or whatever else. It's a scary thing to a small publisher to be like, hey, look, I'm going to print 250 or 300. I'm not comfortable doing that. You know what I'm saying? I leave cover A and cover B are always unlimited print for my books. In fact, all the books for Greed are unlimited. All the covers, all of them are unlimited. Don't limit our fans, Russ. Stop doing that, Russ. The store incentives are great. I think that when we had a brick and mortar, it was literally like, yeah, that's what we were just talking about. It's craziness. But like when we had a brick and mortar, it was like, you know, the 1 in 200 Venom covers, or the, you know, even for Image and stuff. Image had the gold number ones. You know, you only got one in shop. That was cool because you only had to order a couple to get the number one.
Yep.
Right? You got the.
But now you got, like, for Berserker, you have the 1 in 1,000 store value. So you got to order 1,000 issues to get one of these.
Right. Even if you order to the best of your ability with stuff like that, okay. I didn't know I had like 4 other shops within an hour and a half of mine. I didn't know a single one of them that could pop off and be like, hey, I just bought a $2,000 cover. It makes it kind of ridiculous.
That's like the Berserker 1 in 1,000. So it's going for there were several people that got it graded by and signed by Keanu Reeves because he doesn't sign a lot of stuff. They're going for $5,000.
Well, I mean, and that's awesome if you can make that happen, though. You know,
Yeah.
But the normal comic shop, with the amount of books that I would buy, you know, from like in-store people coming into the shop selling books or selling figures or selling statues, there was no way I was going to pop off $2,000 for a cover. You know what I mean? It just, because then it's like a same thing with the books that we produce now. It's like a cost of gain, right? I don't know for a fact, like Marissa's covers. Yeah, I agree with you, Danny. And it's a shame. It's an absolute shame.
It is.
So like with Marissa's covers, they did well on the Kickstarter, but after the Kickstarter is when her covers started selling really well for me. Like people were trying to get the sets of her covers and so on and so forth. And those, you know, but it's like, that makes me nervous. How many do you order? You know, how many do you keep in boxes in your house? You know, because your average cost to print all our books are cardstock. Like I'm only going to give you a nice product. You know what I'm saying? So all our books being cardstock, you're going to spend between $2.75 to $4.25, depending on your printer. Okay, it's generally what you're going to spend. So if I buy 100 of those books at $3 to $4, and I only sell 20 of them, that's fine. I've made my money back. But at the same time, now I've got all these books in my house. You know what I'm saying? And even with your websites, your Shopify's, your stores like we have and stuff, you never know how long they're going to be there, right? So then you're CGCing them because you're trying to move them a little bit faster, or you're trying to get them signed. All these things, they're all factors. And I think that's the big thing about being a small printer, or a small publisher. You're like, how many do I get? So I do try to keep the print run low for the most part.
Yeah, and to go back on what Danny said, yeah, I mean and then you got to figure in all of the not only that, they did the 1 in 1,000 for the stores, for all the store copies, but then they did the Kickstarter. I mean, how many millions of dollars did they make on the Kickstarter? You've got all of those. I mean, there's going to be so many Berserker books printed. It's probably like an entire forest of books that are going to be worth it.
You know what I mean? They're going to be all over the place. So it's like, and what was the one that was a big one a couple years back? Frank Cho's book. Love Frank Cho's artwork. But was it Frank? Pretty sure it was Frank Cho. He put out this book. It's like a space book. It's like 6 years ago. Anyway, cool book, right? Cool concept. But everybody wanted it because it was his. You know what I mean? was either him or Campbell. I think it was his. But the book came out and everybody wanted it. So we ordered a shit ton. Like everybody was ordering it, right? And now all of a sudden it's in like the dollar bin. You know what I mean? Because there's so many of them printed. That's what makes Ninja Turtles such a valuable book right now. You know what I mean? The low run indie books. Like we were talking to Greg yesterday about his book Scales. Okay. So if Scales goes to print, and everybody loves Scales, everybody's an Adam Fields fan. Adam works with us. He's on our team as well. You know, so you're getting Adam Fields out there. And 10 years down the road, let's say Adam pops off super hot, like ridiculously hot, and everybody starts chasing Adam Fields covers. Now Scales is going to be ridiculous because Adam Fields did the entire interior. And, you know, same thing with his other book. You know what I mean? Same thing with The Listener. You know what I mean? Everybody's going to be like, oh, chase Adam Fields covers. That's what happens. Look at Crane. Look at Crane right now. Crane's killing it right now.
All the Venom stuff he's putting.
10 years ago, he was still doing covers and no one cared. No one cared. He was doing Venom covers. He was doing Venom Carnage. No one cared. Now all of a sudden, he's hot. So it's like, chase all these books down. These dollar books are now $30 and $40 a piece. You know, yeah, Prowl, absolutely. But he does, you know, that's the book I was thinking of. Sorry, Danny. Thank you. I knew it was a werewolf book, but I wasn't trying to be like, it's a werewolf book. You know what I mean? Prowl is super good, but he also does Scales, and he works with Greg on other things as well as The Listener and whatnot. But what I mean is, it will chase an artist, and once they do, it's like now even the stuff that was indie or that nobody knew about are popular for that artist. I mean, there's stuff by Jamie Tyndall, stuff that Greg Horn has put out for indie books and stuff that pop up every now and then, and you'll see them for $200 and $300 a pop. You know what I mean? Because the print run is low.
Yeah.
You know? And it sucks that Berserker is going to be that way because I was excited about it.
Yeah. I mean, next time there's a toilet paper variant, there's going to be a lot of cover A's for Berserker that are going to be rolled up. I mean, not that it's a bad book. It's just there's going to be so many freaking copies that these comic shops are going to have. They're not going to know what else to do with them. You know,
with me, they always became free comic book day books. You know? Or like when we were donating books, they'd get put in the donation piles and stuff because it was just like there's too many. You know, Steph, you know what, my friend, you are doing quite well. So, speaking of Jim Noble, you're doing quite well with Jim Noble as well, my friend. So, but you know, speaking of that, the new IP, you know, getting into things like that and all kinds of other fun stuff that we're working on is actually like a anthropomorphic dinosaur type of deal. So I'm really excited about that. Oh no. Okay, well, there you go, Steph. Shots fired, right? Jesus. Is it normally this hostile around here, Russ? I mean,
it's always this hostile around here. I mean, you should have been here for the Phil Russert roast.
Oh no!
So he's the Philly cheesesteak. Ooh, baby, I roast so good.
Y'all are silly, man.
Oh man, well, it was funny. So Phil was just ragging on Steph about how much he begged for Philip to do a cover with him, and then I go on Philip's video the other day, and he's like begging, and I'm like, oh man, who was saying that Steph Wilson's a beggar now? So you know.
Oh no. Well, you know, that's funny though. I
haven't even begged yet.
There's there's a lot of artists that come out, right? And like I said, art's subjective. So you're like, that's beautiful. You know what I'm saying? It's absolutely stunning stuff. But if, you know, and I'll use Steph because he's in the room and it's not, you know, there's nothing negative about the man's art. He's a great dude and his art's fantastic. But I don't think that fits the listener, you know what I mean? Versus my new IP, his covers would look great on it. You know what I mean? It's just, that's super cool.
Steph draws dudes. Did you know that?
I didn't know Steph drew dudes.
Yeah, he said it was a one and done. So this this piece is going to be worth $1 million one day, apparently, or something like that. You know,
I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. Oh no, ugly crying. Get out of here. Y'all are a mess, man. Y'all are awful. So the but yeah, so you got greed, you've got the listener, you've got all these different cool stuff that we're working on with these amazing, amazingly talented people, like I said, from you know, Eric Viola to Mike DeBalfo to David Fott and all these really cool folks, Marissa Pope. I could go on and on, because I've always felt like if I'm going to do something well, I'm going to bring on people that I know do the job well.
Well, and the best thing about what you do is I love this. This is one thing I like that you said. You let the artist draw how they perceived it.
Absolutely.
That's exactly what I did for Xenonanite Titan. I mean,
For
I
sure.
would tell him, I'm like, here's the base art, here's the colors. I'm like, and Steph had a hard time with that. I mean, he originally sent me the concept art for it, and I don't think I have it loaded in here, but it turned out way different than what his actual piece turned out with. I still liked what he drew before, but it wasn't him. He was trying to draw what he thought I wanted. And he's like,
Right.
wait, you want me to do my thing? And I'm like, yeah, do
Absolutely.
it how you see the character. I mean, that's the thing. You have readers that are reading the book. Even if you show them pictures of the characters, they're still going to envision their own idea of what the character looks like.
For sure.
So having different artist views, people can connect. Oh, this is the piece that I connect with the most. This is how I've seen the character. Or this is the piece.
Absolutely. That's so powerful, man. And it brings such a connection to the book.
And allows the artist to shine. I mean, you can't take, Bob Ross and ask him to draw Spawn, you have to.
This looks pretty over here.
We're going to add a little tree over here next to the Violator. Just one pretty little tree. And it's just the thing. You don't want to ask somebody to do a style that they're not comfortable with. You want somebody to draw how they're comfortable. So you give them the free reins. And yeah, you might make an edit here or there, like with David Fott's piece. He had a great idea, and I expanded on it. I'm like, how about we do this? But it was never like, no, I don't like that. I want you to do it this way.
Absolutely.
Give them the freedom. Let them shine in their own
Well, that's what you paid them to do. You brought them on to do it their way. That's why you reached out to them to begin with. It's like if I go, I want a boob cover. I tell you what, it was one of the most epic things anybody said to me. Marissa said it to me the other day. She was like, Dustin, I can't do this particular cover the way this way. I'm gonna have to do it this way because it's a highbrow book. She was talking about the listener. She was like, Greed and the new IP or whatever, but this is a highbrow book. I have to be careful about what I put on for it because I'm your friend. I want you to understand that. And I was like, I appreciate it. Because that was also said by Mike DeBalfo. He was like, hey, look, I don't want to put smut on the cover. And I was like, well, I appreciate that. Because sometimes we don't see it because we're, you can't see the forest because of trees, right? You're so deep into it that you're like, hey, look, boobs aren't great for every book. You know what I mean? They're not. Whereas you go, okay, well, now you're bringing Lilith on and you're like, okay, well, yeah, do something with that. You know what I mean? Uh-oh, we're going to see a Rocky piece. Is that coming? Is that what we're opening the book for?
Well, maybe.
Okay. So we'll segue into Rocky in a minute then, right? So there's a lot to be said about people and the different art styles, different books and what they need versus the new IP. I will definitely reach out to Steph. I know Jim's. I'm not knocking boobs. I promise. I'm not. That's totally not what I'm saying. I'm just saying they're not for every cover, is what I mean. Not for every cover. Just because, I don't know.
Like you get this naughty fairy, because Wendy knocks stuff for so there's stuff pull. So Wendy always knocks stuff, make them smaller. So naughty fairy's got an RX for bigger boobs.
That's funny. And
so,
I agree, Steph. I agree 100%. I'm with you on that. I mean, you can't. That's a formula that will never change. That particular one is.
And then we got Critter.
There you go.
Critter and Stuff Pool. He's got some catnip.
He said normal size.
Yeah, normal size. So I don't know. I've been doing these commissions because that was one of the day one backer bonus things. I don't remember who that one was for, but that's my thing fun. Is doing Stuff Pool. It's kind of not an original character. It's just the first time Stuff did You Can Draw one of the first things we did was Deadpool. And so, I turned it into a thing. And so, you've got Xeno Nanite Titan fighting stuff pool. And, you
That's
got,
awesome.
it's just something, I'm not an artist by any means, but
But
it's
it's
something
fun.
that I have fun with. And
Absolutely.
so, like the one for CB that I'm going to color and send to him, it's, oh, Steph, will you increase my circle template?
Oh my gosh.
And he said, I don't want none unless you got space buns, hon.
That's hilarious. See,
Yeah.
that stuff, it's the little things that make us, it's not just a job, right? You enjoy what you do. And
Yeah.
as you're putting things out, it was like I realized that I needed to have an outlet for the comedic side of things and the boob side of things that I didn't have an outlet for.
Or then you get Felix.
I love Felix the Cat, man. Oh no, that's hilarious. That's the funniest thing ever. See, look, you win the internet, man. You win the internet just because of that particular image.
Well, and I missed this Thursday and I missed last Thursday. I've been busy doing these for the Kickstarter and trying to message the Library of Congress to see how much longer it's going to be on the copyright and debating on whether or not I go ahead and just print without it.
Well, there's a if you look into I don't remember what it's underneath, but in the United States, if you create something and you have proof of creation, it's considered copyright. You own it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah. Well,
I
I just don't
mean,
want to print 250 books without a copyright and then, and then get it like a week later. You know what I mean?
right? No, I'm with you. I'm just saying you're protected. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you're not, because especially with computers now and time periods of creation and stuff like that, I would not even stress. As long as you put it in the book, make sure that you notate at the bottom is owned by you, created by you,
Yeah.
somewhere. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'm with you. I think that everybody's doing a killer job right now that we work with and we deal with, and I'm super thankful. Um, absolutely, absolutely, Katrina. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Um, and the cool thing about this industry is anybody in this room, see, Steph's on it too. You know what I mean? It's not just me. It's not like something I just like found laying around. It's real talk. Um, but so and not just those particular things, but if you look at anybody around that we deal with, like and like I said, Steph's easy to use because he's around, he knows people that we know and sees people we see and stuff. If you go into it and Steph sees somebody with your book, 9 times out of 10 someone's going to say something about it belonging to you. You know what I mean? um Poor man copyright is a myth, man. When we got our copyright, it was scary because we were going to print, right? And it was like, I don't know if we can print without it. I don't know if we can have it done without it. And it is in fact a very real thing. It was, my attorney was like, well, you should have printed before. Da, da, da. And I was like, I didn't know I could. I was terrified. Um, but there's a lot to be said about stuff like that. And what makes you comfortable is what you need to do. You know what I mean? If it makes you comfortable, that's where it's at. Like well, we're not going to get into the whole art thing going on right now. So that's shenanigans. It's good for people, and it's great for the industry. It's not great for people that don't like to research things. So, but yeah, real hypes. Greed's coming out. We've got 7 more days. Well, 6 now, I think. We got like 30 bucks left to go. David has the Mortal Kombat cosplay variant that he's coloring right now. That was so much fun for us. Like, it was so much fun for us. We're only going to do it in the Virgin. It really was. It was so much fun to see our characters, like with Oz dressed as Johnny Cage with the Oz on the belt buckle. That was just ridiculous to me, and I think one of the coolest things about the comic industry is we've talked about how people can. I mean, I'm with you, Danny. I understand what you're saying. There's a lot to be said though when it comes to letting people do art for you. when you bring people in, you let them do their own thing, like we do with covers. Do your own thing. It's a good time. The coolest part, and I'll say this, is when you get fan art. When people start doing fan art for you, for your characters, ridiculously cool. It's like the first time you printed your book and you got it, that was awesome, right? Well, now all of a sudden, other people are like, man, this character's dope. Here's my take on it. When you wake up and their artwork is on your Facebook page or your Twitter feed or whatever else, and you see it, and it's your characters, and they're like, hey, did you see this? This is dope. This is my idea about your characters. It's mind-blowing. It's
It
literally
is.
mind-blowing.
Well, I was like Andre, he's like, hey, I'm working on this piece of Xenonenetite. And I'm like, what? He's like, oh, yeah, check this out. What do you think? And I'm like, oh, dude, that's awesome. I love it.
For
It's
sure.
really cool.
I mean, like I have three comic books that are being done right now, like at the very same time. So it's like you catch artwork from every different direction. Have a good night, Mike. It's always a pleasure, man. You see all these, like I wake up and it's like Christmas every morning, right? Because these guys work late into the night and stuff half the time, and I live in Central, so my time period is kind of wonky compared to most people. But because I live in Tennessee and whatnot. Oh my gosh, man, get out of here!
Bye, Steph. Good riddance,
Steph. So, Jesus, cable access level live stream.
That's all right. He streams live from VHS, so that's all good.
Oh no.
He's old school. You don't know how to operate that new digital stuff.
That's amazing. Well, it's a lot of fun, seeing people's different views and stuff. And I can't even talk right now. Jesus. So, speaking of stuff we've got going on, though, guys, before I keep Russell too long, I'm not trying to keep him too late into the evening. But we've got Suncoast Comic Con coming up at the end of the month. Be Kind Rewind. Shut up. Oh man, we're on whammy late night. So. Well, whenever Steph is on, I feel like it's a whammy. You know what I mean? Maybe not that particular whammy, but a whammy. But there's a show in Florida. We're all going to be there. It's me, Jim, DeBalfo, Marissa Pope, Brian Kincaid. Ebbis is going to be there. It's going to be a really good show. If you guys are in Florida, you should really swing by and check that out. I think tickets are relatively cheap. I think they're only like $30 for the weekend. I mean, that's not bad, for a full weekend and Greg Horn's going to be there too. I mean, there's going to be a lot of cats there hanging out. Suncoast is going to be a blast, man. Dude, awesome. Well, come hang out with us, man. Because apparently, Jim and I, so when Marissa told me to sign up, I was like, I don't know if I want to go because I don't know who's going. And, with Corona and everything and, you never know who's going to be at shows. That's a far-ass drive for me, right? Because I'm not flying on the plane with all these big-ass banners and long boxes and all kinds of other shenanigans. Maybe if one of these days when I'm that level and people are flying me, absolutely. I'm really excited about De La Rosa. I'm really excited about Greg Horn, too, because he's a real cool guy. He does a lot of Florida shows because I'm pretty sure he lives there. He does a lot of Florida shows. But, so we're doing MegaCon too, so we'll probably see a bunch of people there too. But it was like, all right, so I'm going to drive down from Nashville to past Tampa for this show, right? And I was like, I don't know if I want to go if not a lot of people are going to be there. So Marissa was like, tell Carrie you want to sit by us, and I was like, sweet, man, that'll make me feel better, because my wife and I'll drive down. It's my wife's birthday weekend and stuff. We'll drive down there and hang out and set up the booth and have fun and stuff. So then all of a sudden it was like, Jim goes, hey, I want to go. I'm going to get a booth. And I was like, sweet, that's badass. And he was like, hey, I'm going to get a booth next to you guys. And I was like, sweet. So I'll, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, man, it's going to be banging. That show is going to be so good. So I was like, man, hey, Jim, are you going to get a table by us? And he was like, I'm telling the promoter I want a table by you guys. And I was like, oh, badass, right? So we got it all set up. And then I'm talking to Carrie because he's putting all our names on the Suncoast website, right? And he's like, I might have to put you guys across from each other. So there's going to be at least one real badass row at that show, like one super badass row, because I think like all of us are on the same all of us are on the same row. So it's gonna be really, really cool. Just like being able to like slide books down tables and get them signed by like 4 different people if you go. You know, you just literally, you don't even have to like walk away. You can literally just scoot down the table having people sign books. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm unbelievably excited about it. Like unbelievable, you know. And as I'm sitting here, I love how people are so supportive. We're getting these messages and they're like, hey, you're only 30 bucks away from funded. I'm like, how badass is that, right? So super excited about the summer. Like I said, we put in our stuff for C2E2. So I'm really hoping to get there to Chicago, hang out with some folks a little further north than me. MegaCon's coming up. We're definitely doing that. Kyle Willis will be there with us for that. I'm fairly certain. So that'll be med fun. But yeah, I mean, that's me, guys. I've had a lot of fun hanging out with you. You know, oh, Russell's got something going on.
Yeah, I was looking. It's in the other notebook that's upstairs. I was looking for the Rocky I started on.
Gotcha.
Busy. I'm always busy, man.
For sure. Well, you got to be, right? What do they say? You know, if a shark quits swimming, it dies.
Yeah.
So, you know, you got to just keep swimming.
Oh man, it's brutal though. 60+ hours at work, and then trying to crank out a Kickstarter, doing promotional shows.
I don't know how you do it.
Working on art, being family.
Yeah, dad, bro. Don't forget to be dad. That's so important, and be husband too at the same time.
Yeah, that's why I kind of let the review show go the last few weeks. There's just a lot of stress stuff going on with me health wise, and you know what we talked about earlier that happened this past week, and it's just like
take care of you, man.
That's right.
You know, you love the fans, you love the supporters and everything, but you got to take care of you. Man, Danny, so we threw a con in Jacksonville. Oh my gosh, 6 years ago. We helped manage it, and it was cool, you know, but it was batshit. You know, it was literally like so many people, and the guys that were running it, they were bringing in older cats. You know what I mean? And these are cats that have been around since the 70s. So you're bringing them in, and half of them, and I'm not going to drop names, half of them were not nice people, like not nice people. So like I got a call from somebody that their plane came in late. Their plane came in at 10 o'clock. So I sent one of the younger dudes to go pick them up from the airport and bring them to the show. They get to the show, and then they're hollering at the kid because he doesn't know where to take them to get food. Like, I'm like, there's burger place. You're downtown. There's not like regular stuff, you know, so you literally have to go out of downtown Jack's to get food, right? By that time, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. No one's open, you know? And I'm like, well, I can run down the street and then get you a burger from Burger King or something, whatever. And, you know, we'll do a nice dinner tomorrow evening, you know? And I'm like, I'm sure the promoter will pay me back. It's not a big deal. You know, I'll take care of it. And the dude's like, no, I want real food. And I was like, what do you mean you want real food? And he's like, you know, did I stutter? And I'm like, oh, okay. So how am I to get you real food, sir, and not processed food from the burger joint at 1 o'clock in the morning? And like, I could get Taco Bell, you know what I mean? He's like, no, I want you to go tell the hotel to open up the.
Welcome to Jamaica, man. What would you like me to make for you?
Right. Yeah. Basically, dude was like, tell him to open the kitchen. I want like fish, and I was like, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. That's not a thing. So he goes down there. Man, basically, it was ridiculous. It was so ridiculous. So he goes down there, tells the garçon or whatever the hell the dude is downstairs that he wants them to open up and cook him food. And the dude's like, yeah, it's going to be like $250. And he's like, that's all right. They're going to pay for it. So I get a phone call, and dude is like, hey, look, you owe us $250. He's downstairs eating. And I was like, come again? And he was like, yeah. So, I mean, needless to say, I got my money back the next day, but it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever seen. You know what I mean? And this cat, he was an actor, okay? Like on, oh my gosh, it was something like some awful episode of Star Trek. Like not even like a regular actor.
Not a regular cast member. It was just a one-off.
Random dude, right? He was like 70 something years old. I was like, this is the most ridiculous shit I've ever seen. It's not, if you can run a show and you have a team of people and you bring in people that people are interested in meeting, that's a whole different animal than when you run a show and you drop $400,000 for a bunch of folks that no one gives a shit about. The dude at Suncoast, Carrie, running the Suncoast show, I mean, baller, man. Like, really cool people. You know, I'm not even talking money-wise. I'm just talking, that's what you got to do, man. You got to bring in the cats that people are interested in, bring in the cats that are relevant, you know, and it's great to have the guys that have been around for 40 years that people love and stuff. But those are our guys. Like, we love those guys. You know what I'm saying? Because they're the guys that are just a little bit older than us that have been in the industry, so we grew up with them. You know what I mean? But you get these young cats that are collecting comic books now, and they have no idea who those dudes are. You know, and they're the ones coming to shows going, hey, look, there's Greg Horn. I need to make sure I get my Greg Horn variant, or I need to, you know, run over here and I need to get, you know, the Jamie Tyndall that came out recently, or, you know, whatever, what have you. You know what I mean? The Crane variant that's popular right this second, or are they graded 9/8? You know what I mean? And that's culture that we're creating with young people. You know, we have to educate them in older artists and stuff so they can see things. Like Michael Turner. You know what I mean? I'm like, man, did you get a Michael Turner? Like, I'm taking books to have Ebba sign them. Most of my books that are going to get him to sign them are The Darkness. You know what I mean? Like, when he was working with Mark Silvestri and stuff, I'm like, hey, look, that's the books I want signed. You know what I mean? Or the Go Ass books that are in there too, you know, but still. The point is there's a lot of really cool stuff that the younger generation coming up, man, and that's cool too. Don't bring in Pokemon vendors. Yeah, I'll say that much. They'll make you money, but get on my nerves, man. You know, I love Pokemon. My kids love Pokemon. But when you go to an event, and I've talked about this with a bunch of you guys before. When you go to an event and they stick you next to this giant 20-foot tall thing with all these like stuffed animals on it, and people can't even see you because the thing is all the way out in front of it, or T-shirts, right? You're like a giant wall of T-shirts, and you're like, yeah, I'm over here. You know, can I like you just want to put like a sign on a stick that you can put out just far enough past it so people know you're behind it.
Hey, at least it's easy. When somebody goes, hey, Dustin, where's your table at? I'm by the 40-foot tall Pikachu.
Right. I stepped on it yesterday.
Oh, there's Pikachu over there, right? He's over there.
That's ridiculously funny. But yeah, that's what it's like, man. It's like, you know, and that's, I think that's a thing, Danny. Right now, we're at a place in time with conventions where people have the opportunity to change the cultural phenomenon that we've had in the past like 10 years. You know, Comic Cons have turned into pop culture cons.
Yep.
And that's what's happened. It's ridiculous. And not that I'm not appreciative of cons that I go to or anything, but I'm saying when you list it as a Comic Con, it should be a Comic Con. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, here's the issue. You water down the artist alley. They get thrown in this area where it's a huge jumbled mess of, oh, the artist should be here, but we had to move them over here, and you got to walk this maze just to find. And right. It's like, it should just be this. These should be the main attraction. This is a Comic-Con. Why did I have to walk through 800 vendors and all these huge walls of stuff to get to Artist Alley where they have booths that are a quarter of the size of the vendor booths? For sure. Absolutely. And the argument that you get with that, and I brought it up, the argument you get with that is the fact that a vendor pays more, okay, for a booth. But at the same time, they make more. At the very same time, they're not the draw to the show, though. No. You know what I'm saying? And that's a big difference. And I think that's understanding that if in the future, since cons are starting again, if people list themselves as a Comic-Con, be a Comic-Con. You know what I'm saying? When I went to ICCC, I had a great time. It was not listed as a Comic-Con. It was listed as a collector's convention. But it was the first show in Nashville since COVID. And I was like, I'm damn sure going to be there. You know what I mean? First show since I'll be there. And I'll be there next year because I did really well. You know what I mean? But it was a lot of fun, you know, to see all the cosplays and stuff like that. I am super cool with all of that, you know. But if, like I said, if we're going to list it as this, be this. If it's listed as this, be that, you know.
we're going to collectible convention. Badass. There's going to be all kinds of stuff, toys, all kinds of shenanigans from all different things. You know what I mean? Sweet. I don't expect to do what I would do at a Comic-Con at a collector's convention. Whereas MegaCon coming up, I think MegaCon was the only one that I've been to, and I've done MegaCon a bunch of times, and as a vendor and as a guest, you know what I'm saying? I think that it's cool though that what they do is it's huge. So they put everybody way up in the front. You've got all the vendors and the sellers and everything else all in the middle, and the artists are all along the outskirts, so you can walk the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? And that's really cool. It's a great way to do it. You know what I mean? Especially the artists that are promoted and stuff like that. They've got all their promotions on the back wall and stuff. And you can always find Greg Horn, because Greg Horn's got the biggest, between him and oh my gosh, I don't know, I can't remember the other dude's name off the top of my head. But Greg Horn's thing, if you've ever seen him at a show, is massive. It's like this huge laid out double booth type of deal with lights everywhere, and just it looks like you're going into the Jurassic Park, right? It's like it's going to open up and there's big old spotlights on everything, or a King Kong, but it's cool and it's fun, and they do it a good way, that you don't have to mix into the stuff that you don't want to see, versus smaller cons that are done in like a Ramada hotel, when you come in and you're just like, and right now where you're supposed to be 6 feet apart and stuff in a Ramada hotel with, so it's, it's just a thing, and it's a thing for everybody. It's not that anybody's, dislikes the other things. It's just like, at least give us some kind of idea of what we're walking into, where a Comic-Con where you can go in and talk to your buddies and hang out and have a good time. Collector's Con, or not Collector's Con, but a collector's convention. You kind of go in and you're like, well, I don't know any of these people. You know what I mean? Glad to be here. Nice to meet you. I don't want to leave my booth to pee because I don't know anybody around here that's going to make sure people don't steal from my booth. So, I mean, it is what it is. But it's going to be a good time regardless. It's a great time to be alive. It's a great time to be in cons, especially with them open up. And I'm excited about it. I'm excited for all the artists and writers and, man, indies especially. It's really cool, man.
It's going to be nice to have them open again.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to give you the big screen. I'm going to give you a chance to give the rundown of what Greed's about again and tell everyone where they can find you. And I will pop the link back in for the Kickstarter. Let's get this man to 100%. Only $30 away.
I appreciate that, guys. Oh, man, $30. That's exciting, right? So Greed is a story about a young dude that's 10 years old and his monster under the bed. Cade is guaranteed to get Oz in all kinds of shenanigans and trouble along the way. The two of them are about to get drug into a war that one of them didn't even know existed. I've got artists from all over working on this book, from Manuel Soto and David Acampo doing the interiors to Eric Viola doing a cover. He's come over from the listener team to work on that. Currently we have, oh my gosh, Rich Parada, Frank Forty, April Reyna, Becky Fuller. I mean, an amazing amalgamation of talent for these covers. Right now, the guys are working on a Mortal Kombat cosplay cover variant. All the covers are $15 a piece. None are more expensive than the other. There's also some 11 by 17 posters on there, which we're really excited about, that Dave and Manny did. And you can find me at Kickstarter, Greed. You can find me on Facebook under my name as well as the listener, Dustin Brunell. And man, $30, right? So 24 full colored pages on cardstock. Really stoked about it. You can catch me in Florida at Suncoast Comic Con at the end of the month, along with a bunch of other people that have worked on my books, including Mike DeBalfo, Marissa Pope, Ryan Kincaid will be there, Ebbis, Jim Noble, Greg Horn, lots of cool people that are going to be there. And plenty of my books you'll be able to get signed by all these people and myself. So really hyped about it. I appreciate you guys supporting my projects. And yeah, that's about me, right?
Well, thanks a lot for being on tonight. Thanks for chatting, man.
Yeah, man. for sure. I appreciate you having me, man. It was a phenomenal experience. You're a great dude. I look forward to seeing, you know, what you do with your own projects. I look forward to hanging out again.
Cool, man. Well, I'm going to kick you to the green room. If you want to hang out, I'll be back in just a minute.
Sweet.
There you go, folks. There's the man behind Greed. Check out his project. Share it out. Give it some love. Shares are free. So if you can't afford to back it, please make sure to share it out. Get them to that 100% mark. And it looks great. It was great talking to him. This guy definitely researches his projects, and it's a great time to be in indie comics because there's a lot of cool stuff going on. But everyone, thanks so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate you guys hanging out, chatting, all the questions that were asked. And for everyone that goes back and watches this, I appreciate you as well. So thanks a lot for being here tonight, guys. You know the drill. As always, Rust Explode Studios, projects that'll blow your mind. You guys have a great week. And I will see you on Tuesday with Katrina.